The Zephyrian transport ship drifted through the void like a dying whale, its hull scarred by plasma burns and meteor impacts. Inside the cramped vessel, Cale pressed his six-fingered hand against the cold metal wall and felt the vibrations of failing engines. His silver skin had taken on a dull gray pallor that spoke of exhaustion and despair. Around him, 312 of his people huddled in the cargo bay, their once-proud crystalline armor now cracked and tarnished. "How much longer?" whispered Vera, his younger sister. Her usually bright violet eyes had dimmed to a pale lavender, a sure sign of malnutrition among their kind. Cale checked the primitive scanner they had managed to salvage from their homeworld before the Great Exile. The navigation system shows we're approaching the outer rim of what the galactic databases call the Sol system. There's supposed to be an inhabited world here. "You mean the humans?" Elder Thane's voice carried across the bay, causing several Zephyrians to turn their heads. The old leader's crystalline carapace had lost most of its shine, but his mind remained sharp. "The species that barely discovered fire when the Galactic Council was formed." Cale nodded reluctantly. "According to the star charts we purchased from those Vraxian smugglers, humans achieved spaceflight only 300 cycles ago. They're not even members of the Council." A bitter laugh echoed from somewhere in the crowd. "Perfect," someone muttered. "We go from being the Council's most trusted peacekeepers to begging for scraps from primitives." The words stung because they were true. For over 2,000 years, the Zephyrians had served as the Galactic Council's military arm. Their natural ability to adapt to different atmospheric conditions and their superior reflexes made them ideal soldiers and peacekeepers. They had fought in the Andorian Rebellion, stopped the Krelian invasion of the Outer Rim, and maintained order across 17 star systems. Then came the accusation. Cale's jaw tightened as he remembered that terrible day 6 months ago. The Council chambers on Nexus Prime, with representatives from 47 species sitting in judgment. The evidence presented by the hegemony, energy weapon signatures that matched Zephyrian technology found at the site of 3 destroyed civilian transports. Video recordings that appeared to show Zephyrian soldiers executing prisoners. Financial records suggesting they had been selling military secrets to the highest bidder. All of it false. All of it carefully fabricated by the hegemony, the same alliance of merchant species that had been pushing for reduced military spending and the dissolution of the Zephyrian peacekeeping forces for decades. But the evidence was convincing enough for the Council to act. "The Zephyrians are hereby stripped of all military authority," the Council president had declared, her ant-like features expressionless. "Furthermore, due to the severity of these crimes against galactic peace, all Zephyrian citizens are banished from Council space. They have 72 hours to evacuate. 72 hours to abandon the only home they had known for generations. 72 hours to pack what they could carry and leave behind everything they had built. Most of their fleet had been impounded as evidence, leaving them with only a handful of transport ships to carry their entire surviving population of 43,000 souls. The worst part wasn't the exile itself. It was the way their former allies had turned on them. Species they had protected for centuries suddenly refused to trade with them or allow them passage through their territories. The Caltheron, whose colonies they had saved from the Void Plague, shot at their ships on sight. The Ythani, who had personally thanked Cale for rescuing their ambassador's daughter from kidnappers, sent a message telling them to rot in the dark between stars. "Contact on sensors," announced Jex from the pilot's station. The young technician's voice cracked slightly. It's definitely artificial, metal construction, fusion drives. Should I try to establish communication?" Elder Thane pushed his way forward, moving carefully in the low gravity. "What kind of ship is it? Military?" "I don't think so. The energy signature is too weak for warship-class weapons, and it's moving slowly. Looks like some kind of cargo vessel or research ship." Cale joined them at the controls, studying the readouts. "Can you translate their communication protocols?" "Already working on it. The Vraxians included human communication algorithms in that data package they sold us. Seems humans use a pretty basic system, radio waves with digital encoding. Very primitive, but..." Jex paused, listening to something through his headset. "I'm getting a transmission." The voice that came through their speakers was rough and distinctly alien, but the translation software managed to convert it to understandable Zephyrian. "Unknown vessel. This is the UEF cargo ship New Horizon. You appear to be in distress. Do you require assistance?" A stunned silence fell over the cargo bay. Assistance, from a species they had never even encountered before. After 6 months of being shot at, cursed at, and driven away from every civilized system in the galaxy, the simple offer of help felt almost too good to be true. Elder Thane gestured for Jex to open a channel. Human vessel New Horizon, this is the Zephyrian transport Star's End. We are refugees seeking safe passage through your system. We mean no harm and will accept any assistance you can provide. Copy that, Star's End. I'm reading some pretty serious damage to your ship's hull and engines. My name's Captain Sarah Chen. What's your situation? Kale found himself impressed despite his exhaustion. The human captain's tone was professional but concerned, not the suspicious hostility they had encountered everywhere else. Captain Chen, we have 312 passengers aboard. Our ship has been traveling for 6 months with minimal maintenance. We require fuel, spare parts, and possibly medical supplies. 6 months? Jesus. Okay, listen, I'm going to need to contact my superiors, but I can tell you right now that United Earth Fleet policy is to assist any vessel in distress regardless of species affiliation. Can you make it to the 4th planet? That's Mars. We've got repair facilities there. Thane looked at Kale, who checked their fuel reserves again. We can make it, Captain Chen, thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm just one ship, but I'll escort you in and make sure nobody shoots at you while we figure things out. The connection ended, leaving the Zephyrians staring at each other in amazement. Nobody shoots at you while we figure things out, Vera repeated slowly. When was the last time anyone said something like that to us? Never, Kale admitted. Even before the exile, other species were always cautious around us. They respected our military power, but they never offered casual help like this. The journey to the 4th planet took 18 hours. During that time, the human cargo ship New Horizons stayed close to them, occasionally checking in to make sure their engines were still functioning. Captain Chen even transmitted detailed information about human space traffic protocols and warned them about automated defense platforms that might scan their ship. Don't worry about the weapons locks, she explained during one call. The defense grid is programmed to challenge unknown vessels, but it won't fire unless you take aggressive action. Just keep your course steady and respond to any hails. Mars turned out to be a small, reddish planet covered in dome-shaped structures and orbital platforms. As they approached, Kale was surprised to see dozens of ships in the vicinity, not just human vessels, but craft from at least 6 other species he recognized. A Canthari pleasure yacht hung in orbit next to a Vraxian merchant cruiser, while a small Pelari diplomatic ship was docking at one of the larger stations. Captain Chen, Kale transmitted, I thought humans weren't members of the Galactic Council. We're not, came the reply. But that doesn't mean we don't trade with Council species. Mars is an open port. Anyone can dock here as long as they follow our safety regulations and don't cause trouble. You'll find we're a lot more relaxed about that kind of thing than most civilizations. The Star's End was directed to a repair facility on the planet's surface, where a team of human technicians immediately began examining their damaged systems. Kale was amazed to see the humans working alongside alien engineers. A Vraxian mechanic helped diagnose their engine problems, while a Pelari computer specialist worked on their navigation system. First time on Mars? Asked a human technician as she ran a diagnostic scan on their hull. She was a small woman with dark skin and graying hair, wearing coveralls covered in grease stains. I'm Maria Santos, chief engineer for this facility. First time in human space, Kale admitted. I'm Kale, acting commander for this transport. Chief Santos, I have to ask, are all human worlds this, welcoming to aliens? Maria laughed. Mars is probably the most cosmopolitan, but yeah, we tend to be pretty open-minded. Earth went through a lot of wars and conflicts before we unified, so when we finally made contact with other species, most of us figured we had more to gain by being friendly than by being suspicious. But don't you worry about security, spies, saboteurs, criminals. Of course we do, but we found that treating people with respect and giving them a chance to prove themselves works better than treating everyone like a potential threat. She gestured toward the mixed group of workers. Half the innovations in our tech base come from collaboration with other species. That Pelari over there helped us develop our new quantum computing systems. The Vraxian taught us how to build better fusion reactors. Everybody benefits. As the repairs progressed, more humans came to check on the Zephyrian refugees. They brought food, simple but nourishing meals that were surprisingly compatible with Zephyrian digestive systems. Medical personnel examined the children and elderly, providing basic care without asking awkward questions about their past. Your people seem genuinely concerned about our welfare, Elder Thane observed to Captain Chen, who had come down to the surface to oversee their situation. Why? We're strangers to you. For all you know, we could be criminals or terrorists. Chen, a stocky woman with short black hair and intelligent brown eyes, considered the question seriously. Maybe you are, but I've been around long enough to recognize refugees when I see them. You've got the look of people who have been running for a long time and not by choice. Your ship's in terrible condition, your people are malnourished, and you're asking for help instead of demanding it. That tells me enough. In our experience, most species require extensive background checks and documentation before allowing aliens onto their worlds. Yeah, I've heard the Council can be pretty bureaucratic about that stuff. We do things differently. There's an old human saying, don't judge a book by its cover. Means you shouldn't assume you know what someone's like just from looking at them. Chen paused. Of course, we're not completely naive. Our security people will want to talk to you eventually. But first, let's make sure your people are fed and your ship is spaceworthy. That evening, as Kale watched human and alien workers collaborating to install new engine components in their ship, he found himself experiencing something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not just hope that they might survive, but hope that they might actually find a place where they could rebuild their lives. Brother, Vera said, settling down beside him. Do you think they know? About the exile, I mean, about what the Council accused us of? Kale had been wondering the same thing. If they do, they don't seem to care, or maybe they don't believe it. Or maybe, said a new voice, we believe in second chances. They turned to see Captain Chen approaching with a tall, gray-haired human man in a formal uniform. This is Admiral Harrison, commander of the Mars Orbital Defense Force. He wanted to meet you personally. Admiral Harrison extended his hand in what Kale recognized as a human greeting gesture. Commander Kale, Elder Thane told me you're responsible for these people. That's quite a burden for someone so young. I do what I must, Admiral. My people depend on me. I understand that feeling. Harrison's expression was serious but not unfriendly. Captain Chen briefed me on your situation. Exiled from Council space, no permanent home, ship barely holding together. That about sum it up. Kale nodded warily. If you're concerned about us being here. I'm concerned about you having nowhere to go, Harrison interrupted. Look, I'll be straight with you. We know about the accusations against your people. The Council's communication networks aren't as secure as they think they are. We also know that the evidence was circumstantial at best, and that the hegemony had both motive and opportunity to manufacture it. You believe we were framed. Let's just say we've dealt with the hegemony before, and they're not above playing dirty when it serves their interests. But even if you had been guilty of what they accused you of, that was your government, not your civilians. These people, he gestured toward the repair facility where Zephyrian families were sharing meals with human workers. These people deserve a chance to rebuild their lives. Elder Thane stepped forward. What are you proposing, Admiral? I'm proposing that you consider staying, not just for repairs, permanently. Mars Colony is always looking for skilled workers, and from what I've seen, your people have engineering and technical abilities that would be valuable here. We can offer housing, employment, and most importantly, a place where nobody cares what the Galactic Council thinks about you. The offer hung in the air like a gift too precious to accept. All of us? Kale asked. There are 43,000 Zephyrians scattered across 12 transport ships. All of you? Harrison confirmed. It won't be easy. We'll need to expand our infrastructure, and there will be cultural adjustments on both sides. But humanity has a long history of taking in refugees and making them part of our communities. If your people are willing to work and follow our laws, you'll be welcome here. Kale felt his sister's hand grip his arm tightly. Around them, other Zephyrians had gathered to listen, their faces showing a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. There must be conditions, Elder Thane said carefully. Nothing this generous comes without a price. Just one condition, Harrison replied. We ask that you help us when we need it. Not as soldiers, we don't want to repeat the mistakes that got you exiled in the first place, but as partners. The galaxy's changing, and humanity is still pretty new to interstellar politics. We could use allies who understand how things work out there. You would trust us that much, after what we've been accused of? Captain Chen spoke up. Admiral, if I may, Commander Kale, 6 months ago you could have scattered across the galaxy in small groups and disappeared into the criminal underworld. Instead, you've kept your people together, protected your weakest members, and accepted exile rather than abandon your principles. That tells us everything we need to know about your character. As if summoned by the emotion in her voice, children began to gather around them. Human children and young Zephyrians playing together despite their obvious physical differences. Kale watched a human girl with pigtails teaching a young Zephyrian boy how to skip stones in a nearby fountain, while their parents chatted nearby as if they had known each other for years. We would need to contact the other ships, Kale said slowly. This decision affects all our people, not just this transport. Of course, use our communication systems, no charge. Take all the time you need to discuss it among yourselves. Admiral Harrison smiled. But I think you'll find that most refugees, when offered a real home, don't take very long to decide. That night, as the Star's End sat in the human repair facility with her engines finally silent after months of constant running, Kale stood at an observation window and looked out at the red landscape of Mars. Human cities sparkled under the dome-shaped shields, while overhead, the orbital platforms gleamed with the lights of a dozen different species. It's beautiful, Vera said, joining him at the window. It's hope, Kale corrected. After 6 months of having doors slammed in our faces, we've found people who opened their arms instead. Do you think the others will agree? Kale considered the question. Elder Thane is already drafting the messages to the other transports. Captain Mora of the Dawn's Light sent a reply an hour ago. She says her people are crying with relief. The other ships should respond by tomorrow. And if they all say yes, then we stop being refugees and start being colonists. Kale turned away from the window and faced his sister. It won't be easy. We'll have to learn human customs, adapt to their society, maybe even learn their languages. But for the first time since the exile, I actually believe our people might have a future. Outside, the strange red sun of Mars was setting, painting the landscape in shades of crimson and gold. It wasn't the silver light of their lost homeworld, but it was warm and welcoming in its own way. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, and the enormous task of integrating two very different species into a single community. But tonight, for the first time in 6 months, the engines were quiet and there was food in their bellies and hope in their hearts. The stars had banished them, but humanity had offered them something even more precious than forgiveness. They had offered them a home. 3 months after the first Zephyrian transport landed on Mars, Kale stood in what had once been an empty storage warehouse and marveled at the transformation. The cavernous space now housed 43 families in temporary but comfortable living units, each equipped with the atmospheric processors needed to maintain proper humidity levels for Zephyrian physiology. Human engineers had worked around the clock to modify the facility, while Zephyrian technicians contributed their expertise to make the life support systems more efficient. The integration is proceeding faster than we anticipated, reported Dr. James Fletcher, the human sociologist assigned to monitor the settlement process. He was a tall, lanky man with wire-rimmed glasses and an infectious enthusiasm for his work. Your people have an impressive capacity for adaptation. Kale nodded as he watched children playing in the central courtyard. Human and Zephyrian youngsters chased each other around obstacles, their laughter mixing in the filtered air. Necessity is a powerful teacher, Doctor. When the alternative is extinction, you learn to adapt quickly. Still, the speed of cultural exchange has surprised even our most optimistic projections. Take language acquisition, for example. Our children are picking up Zephyrian vocabulary almost as fast as your children are learning English. And the technical collaboration. Fletcher gestured toward a nearby workspace where humans and Zephyrians were bent over holographic displays, designing improvements to the colony's power grid. Your people's understanding of energy systems has advanced our technology by decades. The observation was accurate but bittersweet. For generations, Zephyrian technological advancement had been focused on military applications. Their expertise in shield technology, weapon systems, and tactical communications had made them the galaxy's premier peacekeeping force. Now, for the first time in centuries, they were applying those skills to civilian purposes, improving crop yields, enhancing atmospheric processors, and developing more efficient transportation systems. Commander Kale, a young human woman approached, her expression excited but respectful. I'm Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the Earth Communications Office. We've received a priority message from the Sol System Defense Grid. There's a ship requesting permission to enter human space, and they're specifically asking to speak with Zephyrian refugees. Kale's blood chilled. What kind of ship? Galactic Council. No, sir, that's the strange part. The vessel identifies itself as belonging to the Kavari Collective. They claim to have information about the charges against your people. The name hit Kale like a physical blow. The Kavari were an enigmatic species that operated on the fringes of galactic society, not technically outlaws, but not bound by council regulations either. They were information brokers, smugglers, and occasionally whistleblowers. If they had come all this way to find the Zephyrians, it could mean anything from a trap to salvation. Have they been granted permission to approach? Admiral Harrison wants to meet with you and Elder Thane before making that decision. The briefing is scheduled for 1400 hours. An hour later, Kale found himself in the Mars Orbital Command Center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the mysterious Kavari ship. It was smaller than he had expected, a sleek vessel designed for speed rather than cargo capacity. According to the sensor readings, it carried a crew of only 6 individuals. The ship's name is Truth Seeker, Admiral Harrison explained, his weathered face serious. Captain Zexka has been very polite but insistent about speaking with you personally, claims to have evidence that would interest the exiled ones greatly. Elder Thane, who had been silent during the initial briefing, finally spoke. In my experience, the Kavari never involved themselves in galactic politics without significant compensation. If they've come here, someone has paid them well. Or, suggested Dr. Fletcher, they have information so valuable that they believe you would pay them for it. Kale considered the possibilities. Admiral, what's the risk assessment for allowing them to dock? Minimal from a security standpoint. Their ship isn't large enough to carry significant weapons, and our defense grid could disable it in seconds if necessary. The real question is whether we want to invite that kind of attention to our colony. What do you mean? Captain Chen, who had been reviewing intelligence reports, looked up from her datapad. The Kavari have a reputation for being neutral, but they also have connections throughout the criminal underworld. If they're here, word will get out that we're harboring Zephyrian refugees. So far, our activities have stayed under the Council's radar, but this could change that. The thought of bringing danger to their human hosts made Kale's stomach clench. Perhaps it would be better if I went to meet them, away from Mars, away from the colony. Absolutely not, Harrison said firmly. You're under our protection now. If the Kavari want to talk, they can do it on our terms in our space with our security watching. The loyalty in the Admiral's voice still surprised Kale, even after 3 months. Humans seemed to have an almost instinctive protective response to those they considered part of their community. Very well, but I want volunteers only for the meeting. No one should be forced to take this risk. Risk, Elder Thane's crystalline features shifted in what Kale recognized as amusement. My young friend, we're already exiles with nothing left to lose. If the Kavari have information about our situation, we need to hear it. 2 hours later, the Truth Seeker docked at an isolated platform on the edge of the Mars system. The meeting was arranged in a neutral conference room, with human security personnel stationed discreetly nearby. Kale, Elder Thane, and Admiral Harrison sat on one side of a polished metal table while they waited for their mysterious visitors. Captain Zexka turned out to be a tall, insected being with iridescent carapace and compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Her 3 crew members remained silent as she activated a portable privacy shield and settled into her chair with fluid grace. Commander Kale, Elder Thane, she began, her translator rendering her clicking speech into perfect galactic standard. I bring greetings from those who remember when the Zephyrians stood for justice rather than politics. Cut to the point, Thane said bluntly. What do you want and what are you offering? Zexka's mandibles twitched in what might have been appreciation for his directness. I offer proof, definitive, unalterable proof that the evidence used to exile your people was fabricated by the hegemony. In exchange, I want something very simple. Kale leaned forward. What kind of proof? Instead of answering immediately, the Kavari captain activated a holographic projector. The air above the table shimmered, then resolved into the image of a hegemony council chamber. Kale recognized several of the figures seated around the central table. Merchant Prince Kelvin of the Tory Consortium, Trade Commissioner Yillen from the Vorth Collective, and Grand Negotiator Hexen representing the smaller merchant guilds. This recording was made 6 months before your exile, Zexka explained. My people have certain capabilities when it comes to surveillance technology. The hologram began to play, and Kale felt his world shift as he listened to the hegemony leaders casually discussing their plan to frame the Zephyrians. The peacekeeping forces are becoming too expensive, Kelvin was saying. Every conflict they resolve peacefully is a conflict we can't profit from. Every trade dispute they mediate fairly is profit lost to our negotiating services. But they're popular with the smaller worlds, Yillen objected. The Rim colonies especially see them as protectors. Popularity can be destroyed, Hexen replied smoothly. We need an incident, something that makes them look like the aggressors instead of the protectors. The recording continued for another hour, detailing the elaborate scheme to create false evidence, bribe witnesses, and manipulate public opinion. They had even arranged for the attacks on civilian transports, using modified weapons to implicate Zephyrian forces. The casual way they discussed the murder of innocent people made Kale's silver skin flush with anger. When the recording ended, the conference room fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. How many people died in those transport attacks? Kale asked quietly. 1,437, Zexka replied, including 86 children. Admiral Harrison spoke for the first time since the recording began. Why are you showing us this? What do you want in return? As I said, something simple. When the time comes to reveal this information, I want the Zephyrians to remember who brought them the truth. My people value reputation above profit, and helping to restore justice to the galaxy's greatest peacekeepers would enhance our standing considerably. Elder Thane studied the Kavari captain carefully. You said, when the time comes, implying that we shouldn't reveal this immediately. Correct, the hegemony still has considerable power within the council. Simply presenting this evidence would likely result in claims that it was falsified by desperate exiles. No, you need leverage. You need to be in a position where the council has to listen to you. Kale felt a spark of understanding. You're talking about rebuilding our military capabilities. I'm talking about the galaxy's need for true peacekeepers, Zexka corrected. The hegemony's mercenary forces are already proving inadequate. 3 worlds have declared independence from the Council in the past month alone. Pirates are raiding trade routes with impunity. The Outer Rim is descending into chaos. And you think the Council will come crawling back to us? I think desperation makes people reconsider their past decisions. The Kavari captain's compound eyes glittered, especially when those decisions were based on lies. After the meeting, Kale walked through the Mars colony deep in thought. The revelation that they had been framed should have filled him with righteous anger, but instead he felt oddly hollow. 1,400 innocent people had died just to destroy the Zephyrian reputation. Entire families wiped out as collateral damage in a political scheme. Brother, Vera fell into step beside him. The humans are saying there was important news from the Kavari. Is it true? Were we really framed? Kale nodded slowly. It's true. The hegemony planned the whole thing. They have recordings, evidence, everything we need to clear our names. Then we can go home. The joy in her voice stopped him cold. Vera, what home? Our worlds have been redistributed to council species. Our military bases have been dismantled. Our people have been scattered across human space for 3 months. But if we're innocent? Being innocent doesn't undo the damage. Kale gestured toward the bustling activity around them. Look at this place. Look at what we've built together with the humans. Is this really so terrible? Vera followed his gaze. In the main courtyard, a mixed group of human and Zephyrian engineers were testing a new atmospheric recycling system that was 30% more efficient than anything either species had developed separately. Nearby, children were playing a hybrid game that combined human soccer with a traditional Zephyrian sport called skydancing. At the cultural center, Elder Thane was teaching a class on galactic history to fascinated human students, while Dr. Fletcher shared human poetry with Zephyrian artists. It's not terrible, she admitted, but don't you want justice? Don't you want the people who destroyed our lives to pay for what they did? I want our people to be safe and happy, Kale replied. Justice is a luxury we might not be able to afford. That evening, Admiral Harrison called an emergency meeting of the colonial leadership. The group now included both humans and Zephyrians, a development that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Captain Chen, Dr. Fletcher, Chief Engineer Santos, Elder Thane, Captain Mora from the Dawn's Light, and several other senior Zephyrians gathered in the conference room aboard the orbital command station. "We need to discuss the long-term implications of today's revelation," Harrison began. "The Kavari information changes everything, not just for the Zephyrians, but for humanity's relationship with the galactic community." "How so?" asked Captain Mora. The elderly Zephyrian had been skeptical of human motives initially, but 3 months of cooperation had earned her respect for their new hosts. "If we know the truth about your exile, we become complicit in harboring wrongfully accused refugees. The Council could demand your extradition, and refusing would put humanity at odds with the galactic government." Dr. Fletcher leaned forward in his chair. "On the other hand, if we turn over the evidence and help clear their names, we establish humanity as a force for justice in galactic politics. That could be valuable for our long-term relationships with other species." "Or it could paint a target on our backs," Captain Chen countered. "The hegemony has a lot of economic power. They could make life very difficult for human traders and colonists." Elder Thane had been listening quietly, his ancient features thoughtful. "May I suggest a third option? What if we do nothing with the evidence for now, but use it as insurance? The knowledge that we possess proof of hegemony crimes gives us leverage if they ever move against this colony." "A deterrent," Harrison mused, "but only if they know we have it." "Oh, they'll know," Thane replied with a slight smile. "The Kavari are many things, but subtle isn't one of them. Word will spread through the information networks that evidence of the hegemony's conspiracy exists. They'll spend considerable resources trying to determine who has it and what they plan to do with it." Kale had been silent during the discussion, but now he stood and walked to the conference room's observation window. Outside, Mars hung in space like a red jewel, its surface covered with the lights of human cities and the newer Zephyrian settlements. What if we're approaching this from the wrong angle? "What do you mean?" Harrison asked. "We're talking about justice, politics, leverage, all the things that led to our exile in the first place. But maybe the real question is, what kind of people do we want to be?" "I'm not following." Kale turned back to face the group. "For 2,000 years, the Zephyrians were the galaxy's policemen. We enforced laws, settled disputes, and kept the peace because someone had to do it. We thought we were serving justice, but we were really serving politics. The Council used us to maintain their power structure." "And now," Elder Thane prompted, "now we have a choice. We can try to reclaim our old role, prove our innocence, and return to being the galaxy's enforcers. Or we can build something new." Captain Mora frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe the galaxy doesn't need peacekeepers who answer to politicians. Maybe it needs peacekeepers who answer to their own conscience." Kale gestured toward the window. "Look what we've accomplished here in just 3 months. Humans and Zephyrians working together, sharing knowledge, creating something better than either of us could build alone." Dr. Fletcher's eyes lit up with understanding. "You're talking about an independent peacekeeping force." "I'm talking about something more fundamental. A community that proves different species can coexist and cooperate. A place where refugees and outcasts can find shelter. A demonstration that there's an alternative to the Council's political games." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "It's an ambitious vision," Harrison said finally, "but it would make us a target for anyone who benefits from the current system." "We're already targets," Elder Thane pointed out. "At least this way we choose what we're fighting for. And the evidence against the hegemony. We keep it," Kale decided. "Not as a weapon, but as a shield. If anyone tries to destroy what we're building here, we remind them that we know where the real criminals are." Captain Chen smiled. "I have to admit, there's something appealing about building a society based on cooperation rather than competition." "It won't be easy," warned Captain Mora. "There will be conflicts, disagreements, cultural misunderstandings." "Then we'll learn to resolve them without violence," Dr. Fletcher replied. "Humanity's history shows that it's possible." As the meeting broke up, Kale found himself standing at the observation window again. This time, Admiral Harrison joined him. "Second thoughts?" the human asked. "Many thoughts," Kale admitted. But not second thoughts. For the first time since the exile, I feel like we're moving towards something instead of running away from something. It's going to be hard work. Building a new society always is. The Zephyrians are no strangers to hard work, and from what I've seen, neither are humans. Harrison chuckled. No, we're not. We're also stubborn, idealistic, and occasionally crazy enough to take in 43,000 alien refugees without asking too many questions about their past. And for that, Kale said quietly, we will be forever in your debt. Friends don't keep debts, Harrison replied. They just help each other build something better. Outside the window, the lights of Mars twinkled in the darkness, each one representing lives that had found hope after despair, purpose after exile, and community after isolation. It wasn't the justice they had originally sought, but it was something more valuable. It was a chance to create a future worth living in. The stars had banished them, but humanity had given them something far more precious than their old home. They had given them the opportunity to become something new. 2 years had passed since the first Zephyrian transport limped into human space, and the transformation of the Mars colony was nothing short of remarkable. What had begun as a desperate refugee camp had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history. A true interspecies community where humans and Zephyrians lived and worked as equals. Kale stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity station, watching cargo ships from a dozen different species dock at the expanded orbital platforms. The sight still amazed him. When word had spread that Mars colony welcomed all peaceful visitors regardless of their political affiliation, traders and refugees from across the galaxy had begun arriving. Pelari merchants seeking rare minerals found themselves working alongside Vraxian engineers. Kenthari artists collaborated with human designers to create architectural wonders that neither species could have imagined alone. Penny for your thoughts? The voice belonged to Dr. Sarah Kim, who had been promoted from lieutenant to director of interspecies relations after demonstrating a remarkable talent for diplomatic problem-solving. Kale smiled at the human expression, which he had learned meant offering to listen to someone's concerns. I was thinking about how much has changed. When we first arrived, I thought we would be fortunate to survive as refugees in human space. I never imagined we would become partners in something like this. Sarah joined him at the observation window, following his gaze to the bustling activity below. The sociologists back on Earth are calling it the Mars miracle. 47 different species working together with minimal conflict, creating innovations in technology, art, and social organization that are decades ahead of anything the Galactic Council has achieved. It's not without its challenges. Oh, but that's what makes it remarkable. Instead of avoiding problems, we've learned to solve them together. She gestured toward a section of the station where a mixed group of beings was engaged in what looked like heated discussion. See that argument over there? That's a hegemony trade representative trying to convince a collective of independent merchants to sign an exclusive distribution agreement. The merchants are refusing because they've seen how much more profitable cooperation is than competition. The observation was accurate. The Mars model, as economists throughout the galaxy were calling it, had produced prosperity that traditional trade relationships couldn't match. When species shared knowledge and resources instead of hoarding them for competitive advantage, everyone benefited. Zephyrian shield technology combined with human manufacturing techniques had produced personal protection devices that were lighter, cheaper, and more effective than anything available through council markets. Pelari quantum computing merged with Vraxian fusion technology, created energy systems so efficient that even the notoriously profit-minded Ferengi had sent delegations to study them. Director Kim, we have a situation. The voice came from the station's communication center, where a young human technician was monitoring incoming transmissions. We're receiving a priority message from the Outer Rim. The source identifies itself as the Talar Independence Movement. Kale felt his blood chill. The Talar were one of the species that had declared independence from the Galactic Council 18 months earlier, citing excessive taxation and military interference in their internal affairs. According to intelligence reports, the Council had responded by imposing an economic blockade and authorizing hegemony mercenary forces to enforce it. Put it through to Conference Room Alpha, Sarah instructed, and ask Elder Thane and Admiral Harrison to join us. 10 minutes later, they were seated around a holographic display showing a desperate-looking Talar female with scorch marks on her natural armor plating. This is Chancellor Vexty of the Talar Republic. We are transmitting on all frequencies in the hope that someone will hear our plea. The hegemony blockade has cut off all supply lines to our worlds. Our people are starving, and our defenses are failing. We formally request assistance from any neutral parties willing to provide humanitarian aid. The transmission ended, leaving the conference room in heavy silence. How bad is the situation? Admiral Harrison asked his intelligence chief, Commander Rodriguez. Bad. The Talar worlds have been under blockade for 3 months. No medical supplies, no food shipments, no replacement parts for critical infrastructure. Latest estimates suggest they have maybe 2 weeks before complete societal collapse. Elder Thane, who had been studying the stellar charts, looked up with a grim expression. The Talar system is 4 days from here by fast courier. If we're going to help, we need to decide quickly. What kind of help are we talking about? Sarah asked. Humanitarian supplies, medical aid, or something more? The fundamental question, Harrison replied, is whether we're willing to break the hegemony blockade to deliver that aid. The words hung in the air like a challenge. For 2 years, the Mars colony had maintained its independence by avoiding direct confrontation with galactic powers. They welcomed refugees and traders, but they didn't interfere in political conflicts. Helping the Talar would cross that line definitively. What's our legal standing? Kale asked. Commander Rodriguez consulted her datapad. The blockade is technically legal under Council law since the Talar are classified as rebels. However, the humanitarian crisis gives us some wiggle room. International law recognizes the right to provide medical aid and food even to combatants. The hegemony won't see it that way, Harrison warned. They'll consider any assistance to the Talar as an act of aggression. Then maybe it's time we stopped worrying about what the hegemony thinks, said a new voice from the doorway. Captain Mora entered the conference room, followed by several other senior Zephyrians and humans. We've been monitoring the situation in the Outer Rim. This isn't just about the Talar anymore. She activated her own holographic display, showing a star map with dozens of red markers. 7 worlds have declared independence in the past 6 months. 3 more are on the verge of open rebellion. The Council's response has been to authorize increasingly brutal suppression tactics. The Kavari Intelligence Network confirms it, added Captain Chen, who had recently returned from a fact-finding mission to neutral space. The hegemony mercenaries aren't just enforcing blockades, they're conducting systematic bombardment of civilian targets. They're trying to make examples of the rebel worlds to discourage others. Kale studied the data with growing horror. This is genocide disguised as law enforcement. Which brings us to the real question, Elder Thane said quietly. Are we going to sit safely in our prosperous colony while atrocities are committed in our names? In our names, Sarah asked. The Galactic Council still considers us citizens under their jurisdiction. Our exile was administrative, not legal. Every crime committed by Council forces is technically done with our implicit consent as long as we remain passive. The legal technicality was troubling, but Kale suspected his mentor had deeper concerns. You think we have a moral obligation to act? I think we have an obligation to be what we always claim to be, peacekeepers who serve justice rather than politics. Admiral Harrison leaned back in his chair, considering the implications. If we intervene, we'll be declaring ourselves an independent political entity. There's no going back from that. Good, Captain Mora said firmly. I've spent the last 2 years watching humans and Zephyrians build something beautiful together. It's time we shared that gift with the rest of the galaxy. The military aspects concern me, Commander Rodriguez admitted. Our defense forces are adequate for protecting the colony, but we're talking about challenging hegemony mercenaries in open space. They have superior numbers and firepower. They have superior numbers, Kale corrected. But their mercenaries are motivated by profit, not principle. Our people are fighting for their homes and their values. That makes a difference in battle. Plus, added Chief Engineer Santos via holographic link from the surface, we've made some improvements to our defensive capabilities. The new shield harmonics we developed with Zephyrian technology can absorb and redirect energy weapons. And the kinetic interceptor grid uses Pelari quantum targeting. Nothing gets through without our permission. Sarah stood and walked to the observation window, watching the bustling activity of the station. What kind of mission are we contemplating? A single supply run or something more comprehensive? If we're going to do this, Kale said, we should do it right. The Talar need immediate humanitarian aid, but they also need long-term support. Medical supplies, industrial equipment, defensive systems, everything necessary to rebuild their society. That's not a relief mission, Harrison observed. That's nation building. Exactly. We help them become self-sufficient again, and we offer them the same partnership model we've developed here. Species working together for mutual benefit instead of competing for limited resources. Elder Thane nodded approvingly. The Mars model becomes the Outer Rim model, very ambitious. Ambitious ideas require ambitious action, Captain Chen said. I've been talking to some of our Vraxian and Pelari friends. They're not happy with the Council's increasingly authoritarian policies. Several of their ship captains have volunteered to join a humanitarian convoy. You've been planning this? Admiral Harrison asked. I've been hopping for an excuse to do something about the situation, Chen replied. The Talar crisis gives us that excuse. The debate continued for 3 hours, with representatives from every major species group in the colony weighing in on the decision. The humans were split between their natural humanitarian instincts and practical concerns about colony security. The Zephyrians were almost unanimously in favor of intervention, seeing it as a chance to reclaim their role as protectors of the innocent. The other species were cautiously supportive, recognizing that the success of independent worlds would create more opportunities for free trade. Finally, Admiral Harrison called for a formal vote. The result was overwhelming, 78% in favor of immediate humanitarian intervention, with provisions for long-term support if the Talar requested it. Then it's decided, Harrison announced. We're going to save some lives and probably start a war in the process. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of activity as the Mars colony transformed from a peaceful trading post into a staging ground for what some were already calling the Liberation Fleet. Cargo ships were loaded with medical supplies, food, industrial equipment, and defensive systems. The colony's small fleet of armed vessels was reinforced by volunteer ships from a dozen different species. Vraxian merchants contributed their heavy cargo haulers. Pelari scientists provided advanced communication equipment. Even a few Canthari pleasure craft were retrofitted to carry humanitarian supplies. Kale found himself appointed as overall mission commander, a responsibility that felt both familiar and completely alien. During his days as a Zephyrian peacekeeper, he had led military operations under Council authority with clear rules of engagement and defined objectives. This mission was different. They were acting independently, without political backing, guided only by their own moral convictions. Second thoughts? Admiral Harrison asked as they stood in the shuttle bay, watching the last of the supply containers being loaded onto the flagship New Dawn, a joint human-Zephyrian vessel that had been designed specifically for long-range humanitarian missions. Many thoughts, Kale admitted, but not second thoughts. For too long, we've allowed others to define what peace and justice mean. It's time to show the galaxy that there's a better way. The hegemony won't ignore this. Once we break their blockade, they'll consider Mars colony a legitimate military target. Then we'd better make sure we succeed. Kale turned to face the Admiral. Harrison, I want you to know that whatever happens, the Zephyrians will never forget what humanity has done for us. You gave us more than shelter. You gave us hope. You gave us something too, Harrison replied. You taught us that we're not alone in believing that different species can work together for something better than mere survival. The launch ceremony was simple but moving. Representatives from every species in the colony gathered to see off the Liberation Fleet. Elder Thane offered a traditional Zephyrian blessing for travelers venturing into unknown dangers. Dr. Fletcher read a selection from human literature about the moral obligation to help those in need. Captain Chen spoke briefly about the practical benefits of free trade over enforced monopolies. But it was a young human girl named Emma, whose family had befriended several Zephyrian children, who provided the most eloquent summary of their mission. My teacher says you're going to help people who are in trouble, she said, addressing Kale directly. That's good. When I'm in trouble, people help me. That's what friends do. As the Liberation Fleet departed Mars orbit, Kale stood on the bridge of the New Dawn and watched the red planet shrink behind them. They were leaving safety and prosperity behind to venture into a conflict zone where they would almost certainly face superior enemy forces. By any rational calculation, they were making a terrible mistake. But as he looked around at the bridge crew, humans, Zephyrians, Vraxians, and Pelari working together with perfect coordination, he felt something he hadn't experienced since before the exile: pride. Not the bitter pride of military superiority, but the quiet satisfaction of people doing what they knew was right regardless of the cost. "Course laid in for the Taller system," reported Lieutenant Torres from the navigation station. "ETA 4 days, 6 hours. "All ships report ready for hyperspace jump," added Commander Vexka, the young Zephyrian who served as fleet coordination officer. "Take us to hyperspace," Kale ordered. "Let's go remind the galaxy what real peacekeepers look like." As the stars elongated into brilliant lines of light, the New Dawn and her escort ships leaped into the unknown, carrying with them the hopes of every refugee who had ever dreamed of finding a home, every trader who had ever wanted to do business without corruption, and every idealist who still believed that different species could work together to build something better than what they had found. Behind them, Mars continued its ancient orbit around Sol, but it was no longer just another human colony world. It had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a symbol of what was possible when people chose cooperation over competition, understanding over fear, and justice over politics. The liberation of the Outer Rim was about to begin. The hyperspace jump to the Taller system took 4 days, but the real journey began when the Liberation fleet dropped back into normal space and encountered the full scope of the hegemony blockade. What had appeared on intelligence reports as a simple cordon of military vessels turned out to be a massive deployment of firepower designed to strangle an entire star system. "Sensors are reading 43 hegemony vessels," reported Commander Vexka from her station aboard the New Dawn. "Heavy cruisers, destroyers, and at least 6 merchant conversion ships armed with military-grade weapons." Kale studied the tactical display with growing concern. The Liberation fleet consisted of only 18 ships, most of them converted cargo haulers with minimal defensive capabilities. Only the New Dawn and 3 Zephyrian escort vessels could be considered true warships, and even they were outgunned by the hegemony's heaviest units. "What about the Taller Defense Forces?" asked Captain Chen, who was serving as the mission's diplomatic liaison. "Minimal," replied Dr. Sarah Kim, analyzing the sensor data from her position at the communications array. "I'm detecting scattered energy signatures from planetary defense platforms, but most appear to be operating at reduced power. The blockade has been very effective at cutting off their supply lines." Admiral Harrison's voice came through from the Fleet Command ship Liberation. "Kale, we're being hailed by the hegemony flagship. They want to talk." "Put it through to all ships," Kale ordered. "Let everyone hear what they have to say." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of a hegemony heavy cruiser. The commander was a Vorth, one of the more aggressive species in the Merchant Alliance, with dark purple skin and 4 arms that moved in constant, agitated gestures. "Unknown vessels, this is Fleet Commander Teshva of the Hegemony Enforcement Division. You are entering a restricted zone under the authority of Galactic Council Resolution 2847. Turn around immediately or be classified as hostile combatants." Kale stood and faced the screen, drawing himself up to his full height. Around him, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, projecting an image of calm professionalism that he hoped would impress both their allies and their opponents. "Fleet Commander Teshva, this is Commander Kale of the Mars Liberation Fleet. We are here under the provisions of galactic humanitarian accords, specifically the right to deliver medical aid and essential supplies to civilian populations. We do not recognize your authority to prevent such assistance." The Vorth commander's 4 arms gestured dismissively. "The Mars colony has no legal standing to invoke humanitarian accords. You are criminals harboring exiled war criminals, and your presence here is an act of piracy." "The evidence of our innocence has been verified by independent sources," Kale replied calmly. "Furthermore, the humanitarian crisis on Taller World supersedes any political considerations. We will proceed with our mission." "Then you will be destroyed," Teshva's image cut off abruptly. "Well," observed Lieutenant Torres from the navigation station, "that went about as well as expected." "Fleet Commander, this is Admiral Harrison," came the voice from the flagship. "We're detecting weapon systems coming online across the hegemony formation. They're not bluffing." Kale looked around his bridge crew, humans, Zephyrians, and representatives from 4 other species, all of whom had volunteered for this mission knowing it would likely mean combat. "Are you ready for this?" "We've been ready for 2 years," replied Commander Vexka. "The question is, are they ready for us?" The answer came moments later when the hegemony fleet opened fire. What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded galactic history. The traditional model of fleet combat involved massive ships trading salvos of energy weapons, while smaller vessels maneuvered for tactical advantage. The Liberation Fleet had neither the numbers nor the firepower for such conventional tactics, so they relied instead on innovations that had emerged from the cooperative technology development of the Mars colony. The first surprise came when the hegemony weapons struck the Liberation Fleet's defensive screens. Instead of the expected explosive impacts, the energy beams seemed to bend and twist around the ships, dispersing harmlessly into space. "What the hell?" Commander Teshva's voice came through an open communication channel. "All weapons are showing direct hits, but no damage to enemy vessels." The explanation lay in the revolutionary shield harmonics that Zephyrian defensive specialists had developed in collaboration with Pellari quantum physicists and human engineers. Instead of trying to absorb or deflect incoming energy, the new shields created resonance fields that redirected the energy along predetermined paths. It was like fighting an enemy made of mirrors. Every attack simply bounced away. The second surprise came when the Liberation Fleet began its advance toward the inner system. Instead of closing to optimal weapons range, they maintained maximum distance and launched what appeared to be standard cargo containers toward the hegemony formation. "Incoming projectiles," warned a hegemony tactical officer. "Multiple contacts, low velocity, minimal threat assessment." The assessment was wrong. The cargo containers were actually delivery systems for a new type of defensive weapon developed by the combined scientific resources of the Mars colony. As they approached the hegemony ships, they split open to release clouds of microscopic devices that adhered to hull surfaces and began interfering with power systems. "We're experiencing system failures across all decks," reported another hegemony officer. "Weapons are cycling offline, engines are losing power. What are they doing to us?" The answer was elegant in its simplicity. The microscopic devices weren't weapons in the traditional sense. They were repair nanobots programmed to identify and correct defects in ship systems. Unfortunately, their programming classified military weapons as defects to be disabled, power overrides as dangerous malfunctions to be corrected, and hostile targeting systems as computer viruses to be quarantined. Within 30 minutes of the battle's beginning, half the hegemony fleet was effectively neutralized without a single life lost on either side. "This is impossible," Commander Teshva's furious voice echoed across all frequencies. "You cannot disable our entire fleet with maintenance robots." "We're not trying to disable your fleet," Kale replied calmly. "We're trying to help you understand that violence isn't necessary. Your ships are perfectly functional for transport, cargo hauling, and peaceful commerce. They just can't hurt anyone anymore." "You want to talk about impossible?" Captain Chen added from her position at the diplomatic station. "How about this? We're offering to share the nanobotic repair technology with any ship in your fleet that stands down and allows us to deliver humanitarian aid to the Talar worlds." The offer created immediate controversy within the hegemony formation. Energy efficiency improvements and automated repair systems represented enormous commercial value, the kind of technological advancement that could generate massive profits in the competitive galactic marketplace. "Fleet Commander," came a transmission from one of the hegemony merchant vessels. "This is Captain Yillen of the Profit Margin. I'm requesting permission to negotiate with the Liberation Fleet regarding technology transfer agreements." "Absolutely not," Teshva responded. "We are engaged in combat operations." "Combat operations that aren't working," pointed out another merchant captain. "My ship's weapons are completely offline, but my engines are running 30% more efficiently than they have in years. I want to know how they did that." The debate that followed revealed the fundamental weakness of the hegemony's mercenary approach to military operations. Unlike a unified military force motivated by loyalty and duty, the merchant alliance was held together primarily by profit considerations. When combat became unprofitable while cooperation offered potential gains, the economic logic of their situation became unavoidable. Fleet Commander HFY, Kale transmitted. We're prepared to offer the following terms. Immediate cessation of hostilities, safe passage for Liberation fleet vessels to deliver humanitarian aid to Talar worlds, and technology sharing agreements with any hegemony vessels willing to participate in peaceful commerce rather than military blockade. And if I refuse, then you'll continue to drift here with disabled weapons while we proceed with our mission. Your crew will be perfectly safe, your ships will be more efficient than ever, and you'll have to explain to your superiors why you chose military confrontation over profitable cooperation. The silence that followed lasted nearly 10 minutes. During that time, encrypted communications flew back and forth between hegemony vessels as captains argued with their fleet commander and consulted with their corporate headquarters. Finally, Commander HFY's image appeared on screen again. His forearms were held in what Kale recognized as a gesture of grudging surrender. The Hegemony Enforcement Division hereby suspends blockade operations pending commercial negotiations with the Mars Liberation Fleet. All vessels are authorized to engage in technology transfer discussions. The cheer that went up from the New Dawn's bridge was echoed across every ship in the Liberation Fleet. They had achieved the impossible, breaking a major military blockade without firing a shot or killing a single opponent. Phase 1 complete, Admiral Harrison announced over the fleet communication system. Now comes the hard part, actually helping the Talar rebuild their civilization. The approach to Talar Prime revealed the full scope of the humanitarian crisis they had come to address. The planet's orbital infrastructure was in ruins, with several space stations showing signs of bombardment damage. The surface cities were dark except for emergency lighting, and atmospheric readings showed dangerously high levels of industrial pollutants from failing environmental systems. "By the stars," whispered Commander Vexka as she studied the sensor data. "How many people are down there?" 7 billion on the primary world alone, Dr. Kim replied. 3 billion more scattered across the outer colonies, and they've been cut off from all outside support for 3 months. The scope of the challenge was staggering, but it was exactly the kind of problem that the cooperative approach of the Mars colony was designed to address. Instead of trying to impose solutions from the outside, the Liberation Fleet immediately began working with Talar officials to identify the most critical needs and develop integrated response plans. "Medical supplies are the top priority," reported Chancellor Vexty during the first planning session. "We've had outbreaks of 3 different diseases because our pharmaceutical production facilities lack essential materials. Food distribution is the second priority. Our agricultural systems are failing because we can't maintain the atmospheric processors. Industrial infrastructure is third," added Minister Kexra, the Talar official responsible for planetary engineering. "Our power grid is operating at 60% capacity, and we're losing more generating stations every day because we can't get replacement components." The solution that emerged was quintessentially Mars colony in its approach. Instead of simply delivering emergency supplies, they established integrated production and support systems that would make the Talar world self-sufficient again. Human agricultural specialists worked with Talar farmers to develop crop varieties that could grow in damaged soil. Zephyrian engineers collaborated with local technicians to design power systems that could be manufactured using available resources. Vraxian traders established supply networks that bypassed hegemony-controlled shipping lanes. Pelari scientists shared water purification technology that could operate without rare materials. But the most important contribution was organizational. The Mars model of cooperative governance provided a framework for the Talar to rebuild their society in a way that would be more resilient to future economic warfare. "We're not just delivering aid," Kale explained during a briefing with the Talar leadership. "We're offering partnership. Your independence doesn't have to mean isolation. There are dozens of worlds that have chosen cooperation over hegemony control, and together we can build trade networks that benefit everyone involved." "You're talking about an alternative to the Galactic Council," Chancellor Vexty observed. "We're talking about the Galactic Council the way it was supposed to work," Elder Thane corrected. "Species working together for mutual benefit, not corporations using political power to maximize profits." The transformation of the Talar system took 6 months, but the results were visible within weeks. Power grids came back online, food distribution networks resumed operation, and medical crises were brought under control. More importantly, the cooperative model began attracting attention from other independent worlds. "We're receiving requests for assistance from 14 different star systems," Captain Chen reported during a fleet staff meeting. "Some are council members experiencing economic difficulties, others are independent worlds that want to join our trading network." "How are we supposed to help 14 systems when we're still working to stabilize one?" asked Admiral Harrison. "The same way we helped the Taller," Kale replied. "We don't do it for them, we do it with them. Every world we help becomes a partner in helping the next one. The network grows stronger with each new member." The concept was revolutionary in its simplicity. Instead of a central authority controlling resources and dictating policy to subordinate worlds, the Liberation Network operated as a true cooperative where each member contributed what they could and received what they needed. Technical innovations were shared freely, trade disputes were resolved through mediation rather than economic warfare, and military conflicts became unnecessary because everyone benefited from peace. "It's working too well," observed Dr. Fletcher during a research conference. "The hegemony is starting to lose significant market share to cooperative trading networks. They're going to have to respond somehow." The response came sooner than expected. "Priority alert from Mars Colony," announced the communication officer aboard the New Dawn. "Admiral Harrison, you need to hear this immediately." Harrison's image appeared on the main screen, his expression grave. "Kale, we've got a problem. The Galactic Council has issued an ultimatum. All illegally independent worlds must return to Council authority within 30 days or face military intervention. They're mobilizing the largest fleet in galactic history." "How large?" 3,000 ships from 47 member species. They're calling it the Grand Alliance Fleet, and its mission is to restore order to the galaxy by any means necessary. Kale felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. In trying to save one world, they had inadvertently started a revolution that now threatened to tear the galaxy apart. How long before they reach the outer rim? 6 weeks, assuming they can coordinate that many different military forces. Maybe 8 weeks if we're lucky. "Then we'd better use that time wisely," Kale replied. "Send a message to every cooperative world, every independent trader, and every refugee colony in the galaxy. It's time to find out if our ideals are worth fighting for." As the communication ended, Kale stood at the observation window of the New Dawn and looked out at the rebuilt cities of Taller Prime. Lights sparkled across the planet's surface, each one representing lives that had been saved by cooperation instead of conquest. In 6 weeks, all of that could be destroyed by the same political forces that had driven the Zephyrians into exile. But this time they wouldn't be running. This time they would stand and fight for the right of every species to choose its own destiny. The stars had banished them once, but they had found something more powerful than stellar authority. They had found each other. The battle for the Outer Rim was about to begin. The Grand Alliance fleet arrived at the edge of the Outer Rim exactly 6 weeks after the Council's ultimatum expired, and their appearance in normal space was like watching a metal storm materialize from the void. 3,000 vessels representing 47 different species stretched across several light minutes of space, their combined mass larger than most asteroid fields. Kale stood on the bridge of the New Dawn, now serving as the flagship for what had become known as the Free Worlds Coalition. Around him, displays showed the impossible odds they faced: 3,000 council ships against a hastily assembled defense force of 400 vessels from 23 independent worlds. "Coalition fleet reports ready," announced Commander Vexka from her tactical station. "All ships are in position along the defense perimeter." "What about the civilian evacuation?" "Complete as of 2 hours ago," replied Captain Chen. "Every non-combatant from vulnerable worlds has been moved to secure systems deeper in independent space." Elder Thane, now serving as the Coalition's senior strategic advisor, studied the enemy formation with ancient eyes that had seen too many wars. "They're not moving to immediate attack. They want to talk first." "Probably hoping we'll surrender without a fight," observed Admiral Harrison from his position aboard the human contingent flagship Defiance. "Save themselves the trouble of reducing every world we've liberated." "Incoming transmission from the Grand Alliance flagship," Dr. Kim announced from the communications station. "They're requesting to speak with Coalition leadership." Put it through to all ships, Kale ordered. Let our people hear what the Council has to say. The main screen filled with an image that represented the full power of galactic civilization. The bridge of the Council's flagship was enormous, with representatives from dozens of species standing in formation behind a central command throne. Seated in that throne was Grand Admiral Keshnil, a hegemony leader whose 4 arms were adorned with the symbols of ultimate military authority. Rebellious worlds of the Outer Rim, Keshnil began, his translated voice echoing across the Coalition fleet. I am Grand Admiral Keshnil, appointed by the Galactic Council to restore legitimate authority to this region. You have 48 hours to surrender unconditionally and submit to Council jurisdiction. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. Kale stepped forward to respond, but was surprised when Chancellor Vexti of the Talar Republic appeared on a secondary screen. Grand Admiral, she said calmly, I am Chancellor Vexti, representing the Free Worlds Coalition. We reject your ultimatum and your claimed authority over independent worlds. We fight not for rebellion, but for the right of every species to determine its own destiny. You fight for nothing but chaos and economic disorder, Keshnil replied dismissively. The Galactic Council has maintained peace and prosperity for over 3,000 years. Your independence threatens the stability of the entire galaxy. Your peace was built on the suppression of individual rights, interjected Admiral Harrison. Your prosperity came from economic exploitation of weaker worlds. The Coalition offers something better, true cooperation between equals. Humans, Keshnil's 4 arms gestured contemptuously. A primitive species that achieved spaceflight barely 3 centuries ago presumes to lecture advanced civilizations about galactic governance. Your